I want to give you 4 words in the form of a question that I believe, when really taken in, they could change your life. Are you ready? Where will you go?
When God called Abraham, he said that he would make a great and mighty nation out of him. Their purpose was to be a light in the darkness, to help reconnect the world back to God. God has extended that same mission to the church today. Will we accept the call to reach people with the good news of Jesus? To do that, you will have to answer these questions. Where will you go? Who will you stand with? How will your life matter?
The concept of mission is something that is extremely important to me. For those of you who don't know, a big part of my story is that I served in the Marines for quite some time. And something they really drilled into us was to be mission-minded, to always keep the mission at the forefront of everything that we do. So when I read something in the Bible, like when Jesus gives the church its mission in Matthew 28, to go and make disciples of all nations, that is something that stands out to me as important, and something Jesus is calling each and every one of us to do. However, my assumption is that when we read this command from Jesus to his disciples, we can easily overlook the significance of one particular word: all. The word all is not saying, go and make disciples of Jesus by sharing his good news to those who look like you, think like you, speak like you, dress like you, act like you, get along with you, care about the same things as you, have the same beliefs as you, votes the same way as you, stands and fights for the same things as you. No, all means everybody. Everybody. Our mission is to take the good news of salvation that is only found in Jesus and broadcast that message to those who are like us and those who are not like us, to those who already care and love us, as well as those who hate us, to those we like and even those we don't like so much. This is where the mission can get messy. I experienced a lot of amazing things during my time in the Marine Corps, but there's one thing I experienced which I never thought I would have, especially not in the Corps, and that's being bullied. Sure, throughout my school years, I would get picked on from time to time, but I've never really experienced being bullied, probably because I was always one of the bigger kids in the class. And though I never really fit in at the cool table in the lunchroom, I was more of the punk skater kid, I pretty much got along with everybody, for the most part. So when I first experienced being bullied, I had no idea how to process it. The worst part about it was, the main 2 people that bullied me started out as people I considered friends. In fact, they were my roommates when I was attending my military job school. I remember it getting so bad that whenever my other friends from down the hall would get off-base privileges to stay with their families for the weekend, oftentimes I would go and stay in their room for the weekend, just so I could get away from my roommates. I began to hate these guys. I wanted them to fail and for the instructors to see them for who they really were. So when it came time for me to graduate from my school and finally do what I was trained to do, you can imagine the excitement to get away from these guys and all the garbage I was dealing with. But I found out that I'd be going to the exact same unit and workshop as these guys who made my life miserable for the past several months. On top of that, the ringleader and I would have rooms right beside each other that shared the same bathroom. While I was grateful we weren't in the same room together again, I couldn't believe that I still had to share a space with this guy and to work alongside these jerks for the next several years. Now, it didn't take long for my leaders to begin seeing his true colors, and I couldn't have been happier about it. See, a big problem for this Marine was that he couldn't wake up to his alarm on time, and he was always late to morning formations. After all that he put me through, I was happy to see him in trouble almost daily and getting yelled at by the higher-ups. It was like the universe was finally back in order again. But then something happened that I wasn't expecting. Because I was always on time for formation, and because I shared adjoining rooms with him, my leaders requested that I make sure he was awake every morning so he wouldn't be late to formations anymore. Man, I've really struggled with the idea of doing this because in my mind, this Marine deserved every punishment, every yelling he could get. He didn't deserve my help. Have you ever been bullied before or mistreated? Maybe by someone that you felt was supposed to care for you, or even by a complete stranger. I know this can bring up some difficult emotions. I get that. But what I want to do right now is this. On your chair when you came in, you should have received a small index card and a pen. Take a moment and think about a person or a group of people that has maybe bullied you or mistreated you in the past. Someone who you would struggle to help if you were asked to. Now, on that card, write any words that describe how you feel about that person or group. They can even be emotions that you've attached to them. Go ahead and do that now. I'll give you a moment. All right, hopefully that was enough time for you to get some things written down on that card. You're actually going to hold on to these for a little bit. So go ahead, fold up your card and put it in your pocket. I'll come back to those later. The main point or reason for doing this, and even for tonight's message, is that how we view others has a huge impact on who we share the gospel with. Someone in the Bible who came to know this very well is a prophet by the name of Jonah. Jonah was given a mission by God, and it was one that he really struggled with. God told Jonah to go to this great big city called Nineveh, which wasn't even a part of the nation of Israel where he was from, and speak against them, warning them that the wrath of God is coming because of their evil deeds. Things had gotten so bad over there that God could no longer let it go unchecked. But Jonah was like, nope, I don't want any part of that. And so he tries to run from God. And after Jonah gets on a boat, sailing in the opposite direction of where he was called to go, the Lord sends this big storm on the sea that threatens to break up the boat that he was on. And the sailors are like freaking out, doing whatever they can to save themselves. They're throwing over cargo. They're praying to whatever God they believe in for mercy over this reckless sea. And when Jonah realizes what's going on around him, he told them the storm was because of him, and to throw him into the sea so it would become calm. And when they did, the storm began to calm, but not before the Lord sent this giant fish to swallow Jonah, where he would remain alive for 3 days and 3 nights. Now, if you've ever grown up in church at all, you've probably seen the nursery books with the cute little cartoon pictures like these, where Jonah is in the whale, where everyone seems happy, and Jonah's like cooking s'mores in this thing. But realize that this would not have been a pleasant experience for Jonah at all. And I wish I could explain to you how Jonah survived in this giant fish. But the only person I know that can make this possible is the same God that can bring dead people back to life. So while Jonah was in the belly of this great fish, he reflects on his decision to run from God. And even still, God has come to rescue him from drowning, even if it's in a pretty gross way. He prays to God in this time and commits to doing what he was called to do. And on the Lord's command, the fish, we'll just say, projected him out onto the beach. And so Jonah went to Nineveh and proclaimed the message that God gave him, that they would have 40 more days before they would be overthrown. And the people, they mourned and cried out to God that he might have mercy on them. This is where we'll pick up the story in our Bible. So if you have a Bible with you or use the student ones that were on your chair, go ahead and turn to Jonah 3. We're going to start in verse 10. You can find this in page 632 if you're using the student Bibles. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Since Nineveh was not a part of the nation of Israel and therefore not a part of God's chosen people, why would God save them from the destruction they were due? Do you remember what we talked about last week and how the nation of Israel, which came from the line of Abraham, was to be a blessing to the world and help reconnect it back to God? He doesn't actually want to destroy the rest of the people in the world. No, he wants to draw them back to himself. And we see this happen here. This leads us to our main passage for tonight, which focuses on the love and mercy of God, as well as the response that Jonah has to God's graciousness. Starting in Jonah 4:1, we read this. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "Isn't this what I said, Lord, when I was still at home? That is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." Dramatic, right? But the Lord replied, "Is it right for you to be angry?" Jonah didn't struggle with God calling him to Nineveh because he feared the people. He struggled because he worried that God would have compassion and mercy on them. Now, scholars debate the reasons for why Jonah was so upset with God's decision to save Nineveh. Maybe Jonah was narrow-minded as a Hebrew prophet and only cared for his own nation's success. Or maybe because he knew that Nineveh was the head of the Assyrian military that was reforming, he was fearful for what might happen if the Assyrian army came against Israel in the future and he didn't speak against them. Or maybe he was just fearful for his own reputation, if he was seen as being wrong in his prophecy. There are other theories, but whatever the reason is for Jonah, he doesn't believe that the Ninevites deserve God's love and forgiveness. The sad part is, he misses the fact that God just extended the same blessing to the people of Nineveh that he got in the belly of the great fish. God does this because he loves and cares for both Jonah and the Ninevites. And as Jonah admitted earlier, God is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love. He is a God who relents from sending calamity. And what God does for the people of Nineveh is only a small fraction and a picture of the love he shows for the whole world when he sends his son Jesus to take on himself the destruction that you and I deserve because of our sin. This past June, I had the privilege to travel to Turkey and visit a missionary family from our church. And it was truly amazing to hear the stories of what God is doing in and through the followers of Jesus in that country. For myself, I had another big reason for wanting to go on this short-term mission trip. I've spent about a year of my life in a Muslim country before, when I was deployed 2 different times to Afghanistan. During those seasons of my life, and because of my training, it was much easier to see Muslims as someone to be watched, or even as an enemy versus a person made in the image of God. So while this might be a different country, it was still a chance for me to see these people in a new light, loved by God. And overall, it was truly an amazing trip, and I look forward to the day I get to return. However, while we were there, one of the directors of the mission operation shared with us a story of what he described as an American cowboy church in the Midwest that he had visited during his time in the States for fundraising. After he was done speaking to the church about the amazing things that were happening in Turkey, the pastor met him at the side of the stage with a big smile on his face and told him how amazing it was that he and his family were willing to do all the things they were doing. And then he continued to inform this missionary that unfortunately they could not financially support their efforts though. Now, a little surprised by this and curious, he asked if he could know why. And the preacher told him that he just knew his people wouldn't be able to get behind Muslims receiving salvation from Jesus. Now, don't judge too quickly, Because the reality is, we all do this to some degree. Like the bullies I dealt with in the Marines, or Jonah and the Ninevites, or the members of this cowboy church, when we are hurt by people, we struggle with even the idea of showing any kind of compassion, mercy, or even being willing to extend the good news of salvation. How we view others has a huge impact on who we share the gospel with. Earlier, I had asked you if you've ever been bullied or mistreated. I asked you to put a name to an experience and to write down the emotions and descriptions you now attach to that person or group. You've been holding on to this for some time now. And so I'm going to ask you to grab that card again and look at it. Go ahead. I don't know what you've written on that card. And I won't pretend to understand the experiences that are behind those descriptions and emotions. But what I know is this. If you follow Jesus and have committed your life to him, then he has given you a mission to make disciples, followers of Jesus, of all people groups. And sometimes, like Jonah, that can come with great difficulty. Are there people in your life that you have chosen not to share the good news of Jesus with, or to share the love and kindness of Jesus? Maybe because they hurt you and you don't feel they deserve the love of God. And I'm not even going to stand here and tell you that I don't get those feelings, but I am also so thankful that God doesn't measure our salvation by whether or not we deserve it, because we absolutely don't. The Son of God, Jesus, came to this earth to bring salvation, and he was murdered on a cross. But thank God he didn't stay dead. God raised him from the dead, and now we can find new and everlasting life through him, free from the destruction that comes from our sin. And if you've never experienced that mercy or the forgiveness for your sins and the absolute love of God, you can do that today. Let me encourage you to speak to one of your small group leaders in the room at some point tonight so they can help you to begin experiencing the freedom that comes from Jesus. Now, in a moment, we're going to sing songs of worship to our God. And I want to encourage you to release to God the feelings that you wrote down. When the worship starts, if you feel led to do this, you can come up to the front left section of the room and lay those cards down at the bottom of the broadcast tower. Let it be a moment where you ask God to see people the way that he views them. Because how we view others has a huge impact on who we share the gospel with. And if we put limitations up that dictate who we broadcast the good news to, and only go to the places that we're comfortable with, then where will you go?